Jeff Crump.
Lieutenant Crump, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you tell us what department you work for, please?
I work for the Department of State Police, Michigan State Police.
And how long have you worked for the state police?
Close to 23 years.
And of those 20, well, let me ask you this. Currently, are you do you specialize, or are you in a unit? Are you assigned to a specialized unit?
I've been in the firearms unit at the Grand Rapids Laboratory for approximately 20 years now.
Okay. And in that time frame, I mean, obviously to get to that point, did you have to go through any kind of specialized training?
To be selected into the laboratory, it's basically a interview process, and I did interview for a firearms examiner position and was selected, and then once you're selected, you go through a 2-year training program where you work underneath an experienced examiner, working on actual casework under their supervision, doing a lot of reading in the field, doing a lot of practical exercises. Once you're completed with the 2-year training program, you're given a competency test. If you pass that, then you are allowed to work independently. However, any time we have an identification, it's always verified by another examiner.
So there's a check and balance system worked within the laboratory.
There is.
Okay. And I would assume that even though you have all those years of experience, are there opportunities and are you required to continue your training or education in this field?
I am a member of the Association of Firearms and Tool Marks Examiners, a regular member, and with that association, we get quarterly journals with updated research in the field and things that other examiners may be doing at their laboratories, such as interesting casework that they feel as though might be helpful to other examiners. That's a way to keep updated with some firearms aspects. Additionally, we are required to take yearly proficiency tests in firearms and tool marks. So we do that annually, and I have passed those annually.
All right. And just so we understand, when we talk about tool mark identification, what are we talking about there?
Well, we separate firearms and tool marks because obviously we're working with firearms. Tool marks, we could actually be working with a tool, say a screwdriver or a pry bar or a pair of snips. And those can be used in crimes, and those tools can leave behind individual characteristics on evidence that we can also compare back to that tool, just as we compare fired evidence back to a firearm.
Okay, makes sense. So your training and your experience allows you to use that in order to, whether it's a firearm or a particular tool that might have been used in a crime.
Yes.
Now, this goes without saying. I mean, having been in the business now at the lab for 20 years, I'm assuming you've done a number of cases involving either ballistic identification or shell casing identification.
Yes.
Do you even fathom to guess how many cases you worked on in those 20 years?
How many actual cases that I've completed?
Yeah.
I know it's in the 1,000. It might be 5,000 or 6,000, but all of those cases are not cases where I've compared something. They might just have been that I test fired a firearm.
Gotcha.
So actual comparison cases where I've examined fired evidence, such as a fired cartridge case or fired bullet, we don't keep track of those cases, but it's been, I would say, I've looked at thousands of pieces of fired evidence.
Okay. Now, just kind of double backing on the check and balance system, I'm assuming you certainly have worked on and reviewed your own work when you're assigned a case, but have you been part of that review process as well, where you're the second opinion, where you're reviewing somebody else's work?
Yes.
And whether, I don't know if you count that in the thousands that you've worked on, but certainly whether it's your assigned case, you're also reviewing your peers' work as well.
That's true.
Okay. Your Honor, I would ask that we treat Lieutenant Crump as an expert in the area of ballistics and casing identification.
No objection, Your Honor.
You may testify as an expert in that result.
Okay.
One moment, Your Honor. Your Honor, I have no objection to this designation.
Let's talk about, just in general, I see you brought your prop with you. Let's talk about firearms first before we get to the bullet and the shell casings. Can you describe for the jury why this field exists, why we're able to make comparisons of fired rounds and ejected shell casings to specific firearms?
It's been a little over 100 years ago now where this field came into existence because someone way back then had the thought to microscopically look at fired evidence and noticed that there were markings left behind on the evidence. The field has evolved such that a theory was adopted through much research in the field that each firearm, because of the manufacturing process that it goes through, is unique and leave behind unique markings on the fired evidence, such as a fired cartridge case or fired bullet. That fired bullet or fired cartridge case then can be microscopically compared back to test shots to the firearm, and if there are sufficient matching individual characteristics, then we can say that that evidence was fired in that firearm.
Is there a standard as to how many matching characteristics you need to look for in order to be satisfied that you're looking at something that is a match?
There currently is no standard such as a set number that you have to reach before you can say it's a match. What we say is sufficient agreement, and sufficient agreement has to be a formulation that we make during the examination of the evidence that allows us to say that the amount of agreement that I'm seeing on these items is greater than the amount that I would expect to see between an item that I know was not fired from a certain firearm.
Okay. And that's the standard that you use, I should say the Michigan State Police uses?
That's a standard that, as far as I know, all firearms examiners across the country use that standard. It's part of the Association of Firearms and Tool Marks theory of identification. And to go with that, to formulate that opinion of this sufficient agreement is enough for me as an examiner to say this is identification, is because I have gone through, I think, 5 validity tests where 10 consecutively manufactured barrels, and I've also done 10 consecutively manufactured slides, and these weren't prepared by me, but these were tests sent to me. And then looking at either the bullets fired from those barrels or the cartridge cases fired from those slides, and I was able to correctly identify which bullet came from which barrel and which cartridge case came from which slide, because again, the theory holds true that each firearm is unique and marks that evidence differently.
So if I understand what you just testified to, part of this process of certification was you looked at 10 consecutively manufactured, so it was 10 in a row manufactured from the same process,
Yes.
and 10 slides in a row manufactured from the same process.
Yes.
Yet each one of those 10 barrels and each one of those 10 slides, even though literally next to each other on the assembly line, each had a unique characteristic that allowed you to make identifying characteristics of the bullets they fired or the cartridges they ejected.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, and I apologize. I forgot to ask you this, but I'm going to ask you it now. I mean, this isn't your first time testifying as an expert in this area, is it?
No, it isn't.
And roughly, you know how many times you've had to hit the witness stand in your career?
It's over 100. I would estimate maybe about 125 times.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the process or I guess the reasons why we find identifying characteristics from a fired cartridge and a ejected casing. And I'm going to let you use your prop for this. So could you describe for the jury, please, what happens when you pull the trigger, the hammer goes forward, and it hits the primer?
So, and I'll relate this to a semi-automatic pistol. If we have a cartridge loaded into a semi-automatic pistol, and a cartridge would be basically what some people might call an unfired bullet. So we have, if this is the unfired bullet, we have the bullet seated in the cartridge, we have powder inside, and we have a primer at this end. So if this cartridge is in a firearm, and as Mr. Hilson said, if we pull the trigger, the hammer comes forward, strikes the firing pin. The firing pin is going to strike the primer, ignite the priming mixture within that primer, which then spits a little flame out and ignites the powder inside the cartridge, starts that process of burning. The pressure created pushes the bullet out the barrel, and you also have a rearward pressure that pushes back against the slide, and then as the slide comes back, the fired cartridge case gets kicked out of the ejection port of the firearm. So this leaves the firearm, as does the bullet leave the firearm.
Now, how are barrels manufactured, and what's the purpose of that?
There are a few different ways that they're manufactured as far as applying rifling in them, but a rifling does have to be applied, which allows, as the bullet is traveling through the barrel, the rifling imparts a twist to the bullet. Whether it's a right twist or a left twist in the barrel, you need that bullet to spin as it's coming out of the barrel because it makes it more accurate and it flies further. Just if you think about throwing a football and you have a football that's spiraling nicely, it's going to go for a long distance. If it's wobbling all over the place, it's not.
And when you are, and I guess for the significance of your work, then the fired bullet in the rifling plays what role in your identification or your view of we'll just say the bullet at this point in time?
Well, during the manufacturing process of putting the rifling inside the barrel, those tools used to do that can leave microscopic imperfections on the inside of the barrel. Then as that bullet travels through the barrel, those imperfections basically are scratching the surface of the bullet. And those imperfections are what we call individual characteristics because they're individual to the firearm, and those are what we use to look for microscopically when we're on the scope.
Now let's go to the cartridge case. The science behind, I know you've talked about how the role it plays in how is it that you're able to look for identifying characteristics on a cartridge, spent cartridge case.
So the cartridge case, as it sits in the firearm, the back of it, or the breech face, sits against the breech face of the firearm. The breech face of the firearm, during its manufacturing process, again, microscopic imperfections can be left on the breech face. Then when we have the pressure that I mentioned earlier when the cartridge is fired, and you have a rearward pressure, any imperfections on your breech face can be transferred to the back of the cartridge. And so we can look for those individual characteristics on the back of the cartridge. We use those for comparison purposes. We can look for firing pin impression marks, we can look for ejector marks, and we can look for an extractor mark, and we can additionally look for chamber marks on the side of the cartridge.
So again, all because of the way the manufacturing process is, every firearm made is unique in the sense that there are unique impressions in all the areas that you just described in the manufacturing process.
Every firearm is considered unique. However, that doesn't mean that every firearm leaves sufficient individual characteristics behind in order for you to make an identification. So we also sometimes have to make inconclusive results, which says we can't tell at this time.
Gotcha. Makes perfect sense. So now let's talk about the process itself. When you have a suspect firearm, or it usually works in reverse order. When you're provided, for example, when you're provided casings, shell casings, and we'll start there, is there a process that you can go through in order to see whether or not those casings belong or were fired from the same gun, different guns? What's the process there?
There is a process for that, and basically what we do is we will, so do you want me to relate that to a center fire cartridge or a rim fire cartridge?
It doesn't matter because we'll get specific here in a second.
Okay. So there are what we call class characteristics that we can look at, and those could be simply the shape of the firing pin impression. So if I have a rectangular firing pin impression versus a circular firing pin impression, then I know those two items weren't fired from the same firearm, and then I can make an elimination to say those, because of that class characteristics, those two items are not fired in the same firearm. Additionally, besides looking for class characteristics, again, we are looking for those individual characteristics beyond that. That's when we start looking for markings that could lead us to say these two items were fired from the same firearm. If there are sufficient individual characteristics present, if not, then again we have to go with an inconclusive result.
Now let's I want to just have you talk about the fired bullets themselves. I mean, obviously, the more intact that fired bullet is, does that mean for a better opportunity for you to make identification?
Yes and no. It can depend. If I have a full bullet with all the landing grooves visible around the bullet, then obviously I have more surface area to look at to see if there are individual characteristics there that I need to examine. However, I could just have a fragment of a bullet that shows one land impression, and if I have unique enough individual characteristics within that one land impression, I can still make an identification.
Okay, so I guess it boils down to the standard that you live by, whether or not the piece of evidence you have meets that classification.
Yes.
Regardless of how big or how small it is.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Last but not least, before I ask you about your work in these cases, the process that you go through when you're trying to compare to a suspect firearm. Obviously, you hope to have shell casings and bullets, and sometimes you have all three firearm shell casings, bullets, and sometimes you don't. But when you have a suspect firearm and you're testing, whether it be casings or fired bullets, what's the process that you go through?
With the firearm, we are able to obtain test shots, and we will shoot into a water tank, retrieve our test bullets from there, and pick up our fired cartridge cases off the ground. We then use those test shots to compare back to our evidence. So when we go to the comparison microscope, it has two stages. So I can set a piece of evidence on one stage and a test shot on the other. When I look through the viewfinder, I can see both objects, magnify them, and again, I'm looking for those individual characteristics that might be showing on there. It is basically a pattern matching science, and I look for those individual characteristics and to line up those in a pattern to get that sufficient matching individual part to it.
All right. All right, let's talk about the work you did in this case, and I'm going to reference, this is GR 14-3508. That's laboratory number record 3.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to hand you what I've marked as People's Exhibit 159. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull it up here for the jurors. I've highlighted a couple of things. First and foremost, we've omitted into evidence here People's 149 and 150. And I would ask if those references, those shell casings, were the ones that you referenced in your records.
Based on the labels on these containers, I would say yes, that is the case.
Okay. And this is a set of how many fired cartridge cases?
There should be one fired cartridge case in one of the containers and 2 in the other container. So 3 altogether.
All right. And in your analysis, first let's talk about the caliber of those cartridge cases that you analyzed.
The caliber is classified as a .22 long or long rifle caliber.
All right. You know, we haven't had anybody really talk about this, but since you're here, what's the long rifle designation? What does that mean? Long rifle designation. Does that mean anything?
As it relates to this cartridge, a long rifle cartridge, just the cartridge case itself is the same size. So if I am given just a fired cartridge case, a .22, I cannot tell is it a long or a long rifle until potentially the bullet is submitted. So the size of the bullet is what changes that into a .22 long or a .22 long rifle. The .22 long has a smaller bullet in it than a .22 long rifle. So because of that, and not knowing what bullet was seated in that cartridge originally, that's why we classify it as a long or long rifle caliber.
And it should be, we should note, because I think it's in the top right-hand corner, these cartridge cases were submitted to you on what date?
They were received by me in the firearms unit on July 1st of 2014.
Okay, and your examination was completed when?
July 10th of 2014.
Now, you've also indicated in your report the designation C. What does that mean?
C is the head stamp that was shown on the back of the cartridge, and that generally designates the manufacturer or marketer of CCI.
Okay. That's a ammunition manufacturer that manufactures this type of ammunition?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what work were you asked to do, or what work did you complete on these three shell casings?
Given just the shell casings with no firearm, then what we do is I try to compare them to each other on the comparison microscope to determine if they were fired from the same firearm or not.
Okay. And did you do that? First and foremost, did you do that?
I did.
And what, if any, comparisons were you able to make?
Originally, I was able to identify all of them as having matching chamber marks, which would indicate that they were at least chambered in the same firearm.
Okay. Now, I don't know if that's, is that part of the conclusion that's highlighted there as well?
The first bullet point, yes.
First bullet point. Now, I know you talked about the center fire versus rim fire. In your examination of these three cartridge casings, could you make that determination whether it was a center fired or a rim fired action?
They are rim fire cartridges.
And what does that mean?
That means that there is no primer in the center of the cartridge. The priming mixture is in the rim. So when that cartridge is put into a .22 rimfire firearm, the firing pin has to strike the rim of that cartridge in order to ignite it. Again, there's no primer in the center of the cartridge.
Now, also in this report, you were given I believe some fragments to look at as well. Is that correct?
Some fired bullets?
Yes.
Yes.
Showing you what's been marked as 152 and 153. Does that match? The items in those two packages seem to indicate or match what you had looked at.
The laboratory stickers would indicate that, yes, these are the fired bullets that I looked at.
All right, and again, I know it's kind of highlighted, but that second bullet point, were you able to make any conclusions at all, at least initially now, with the fired bullet?
Yes.
What was that?
That all three items, 15A, 15B, and 17, which are fired lead bullets, are consistent with being .22 class, rim fired lead bullets. And that two of those items, 15B and 17, exhibit class rifling specifications of 6 lanes and grooves with a right twist.
Okay.
I further went to say that these items lack sufficient individual matching characteristics, or that they're inconclusive for an identification to each other, but may be suitable for comparison to test shots from a suspect firearm.
Okay, so you didn't have enough classification to say these bullets were fired together at the same time or whatever, but if given a suspect firearm, you were confident with a test shot that you could make some conclusions with that.
Well, I saw what I observed to be individual characteristics on these items in other areas, such as the firing pin impression. However, I wanted to wait for a suspect firearm to see if that suspect firearm would leave behind those same individual characteristics that I'm seeing in a consistent manner be good with any identification that I might want to make on those.
Okay. So essentially, then, this report tells us that the 3 fired casings that are admitted into evidence in this case were fired from the same gun, and that some of the fragments that you had given to you were sufficient enough that if you had a suspect firearm, you might be able to make some comparison to that.
Well, let's back up for the fired cartridge cases.
Yes, sir.
So here I'm not saying they are fired from the same firearm.
Oh, sorry.
With chamber marks, again, what I can say is they were chambered in the same firearm, but I need further beyond that, such as a firing pin impression identification, which then allows me to say they were fired in the same firearm.
Okay, I apologize. I made a leap for you, and I should have done that. All right. This particular exhibit, record 3, is there anything? I guess, is there anything about it that is different or needs to be changed, or anything different than when you first submitted it?
We do have the old copy.
Yes, sir.
I
realize that.
Okay, yes, so there, if that was your question, there is a corrected copy of this report to reflect a change that was made.
And just for, and I know what change you're talking about, but if we could just let the jury know, because I think it's under container 17, is that right?
Yes.
All right. Can you explain to the jury that, please?
So the change that we needed to make was for container 17, the breakdown where it says 1 tape sealed envelope, and in parentheses it says MUPD, and then the number. That was the wrong designation for the agency, and we use MUPD for Muskegon Police Department, but it should read MCPD for Muskegon County.
And in fact, it was Muskegon County Sheriff's Department that submitted these things to you. Is that correct?
I believe, yes, it is.
All right. So, clerical error, essentially.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to move on. And this will be a quick one here. This is going to be People's Exhibit 160. Same laboratory number, record number 14. Okay, handing you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 160. Give me 1 second here, Lieutenant. All right. What is this particular lab report telling us?
This laboratory report just reflects the fact that I asked the agency to resubmit the 3 fired cartridge cases so I could keep them in what I call my open shooting file at the lab. The reason for that was because the agency was continuing to submit firearms to compare that evidence. So rather than have a back and forth of the fired evidence to come back in with any fired or any firearm that they want to compare to it, I just said, let's just leave those items here. So I asked them to resubmit them, and this report reflects that.
Okay, so, I mean, obviously, you don't have an exhaustive storage room to store all these pieces of evidence.
Not necessarily, no.
And just so the jury understands, your lab services how many different counties?
Approximately 17.
Obviously, with the various police agencies within those 17 counties.
Yes.
Okay. So there's a lot of law enforcement that you guys support in this endeavor.
Yes.
Okay. And again, I think this lab report bears your signature.
It does.
All right. Now, Lieutenant, at some point in time, did you receive in the lab a potential suspect firearm?
I received numerous potential suspect firearms, yes.
That's a great answer to a really bad question. All right, handing you People's Exhibit 127. Do you recall receiving that firearm in the lab?
It does have our laboratory tag and item number with one suspect firearm that I did examine, yes.
Okay. And the process, when you received that firearm in the lab, did you go through the same process that you kind of testified to earlier about test shots?
Yes.
Okay. And how many test shots and what did you do?
So this firearm was submitted with 2 different magazines. So because I had 2 different magazines, I wanted to get test shots from both because potentially we could have what we call magazine lip marks that are left behind on the cartridge as it is pushed out of the magazine. And additionally, the evidence fired bullets were copper-coated bullets. And so I wanted similar type test shots. Additionally, I wanted just plain lead bullets as test shots also. So from each magazine, I took 3 copper-coated bullets and 3 plain lead bullets as test shots. So 12 test shots altogether from this firearm, 6 from one magazine, 6 from another.
And when you received it in the condition that it was there something, I guess something wrong with being able to identify a potential gun owner initially?
The serial number was defaced on the firearm, meaning that it wasn't readable.
And can you describe, I guess, for the jury, what we're talking about as it relates to that? I mean, why is that? Why is a serial number important?
Well, the serial number is important because the manufacturer puts a unique serial number on each firearm they manufacture, and then that's tracked once the firearm leaves the manufacturer, tracked by the ATF. The serial number basically identifies the firearm, and it can be traced through, once it leaves the manufacturer, what, say, sporting goods store did it go to, then who was it sold to, and beyond that.
So when you received this firearm, this exhibit, and I think, can you just kind of point out, there's a stick in front of you, I believe. This is People's Exhibit 59, where the serial number on this particular firearm is located.
Serial number would be right here.
Okay, and that's the number that had been destroyed or obliterated?
That's a number that, yes, I couldn't read it. Appeared to be intentionally scratched out.
All right. Looking at People's Exhibit 60, it's a little bit closer view, I believe, of the serial number. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you at the lab have the ability to try and restore those serial numbers?
We do.
And did you make that attempt in this particular case?
I did.
And were you successful? Were you able to actually restore the serial number at this location?
I was.
All right. Now, People's Exhibit 61, does that show, I guess, the efforts of your work?
The bottom larger picture shows the restoration of the visible serial number that you would see if you were looking at the firearm, and the upper picture is a hidden serial number.
Okay, so manufacturers have become, I guess, savvy to this being a typical practice, and they actually stamp a secondary serial number on the firearm?
A lot of manufacturers do, yes.
Okay. So I'm assuming then, I guess I would be careful how I ask this question, that the obliterated serial number that you restored matched the secondary serial number that you found?
Yes.
Okay. And I believe, is that L397038?
098.
098, I'm sorry. Hard time reading that. Okay. I'm going to hand you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 154, some purchase paperwork. And turn to the page where the serial number is listed. Is that serial number the same serial number that you restored?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So were you able to do test shots, I think as you indicated, and were you able to then work on comparing that to the submitted evidence that you had?
Once I obtained my test shots, yes, then I started comparing the test shots back to the fired evidence on the comparison microscope.
Okay. I'm going to go now to record 25. All right. Handing you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 161. Now, let's talk about, this one is labeled corrected copy, and you've kind of already previously testified to the clerical error. The original submitted 25, which is attached to that exhibit, did that have the same clerical error?
It did.
Okay. So just the wrong police agency designation.
Yes.
But we're still talking about your comparison of the evidence that is in People's 152 and 153, as well as People's 149 and 150.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what is this report telling us, Lieutenant?
This report reflects my results for the examination or comparison of the fired evidence back to test shots from the firearm.
All right, the first bullet point is in reference to what part, the casings or the fired lead bullets?
Items 3, 4A, and 4B are the fired cartridge cases.
And based on your analysis under the comparison microscope, what conclusion, if any, were you able to make?
My conclusion was that all three of those items were fired from this submitted firearm, which is item L38.
All right. And just for record purposes, that is marked, or is People's Exhibit 127. Okay. Were you able to do anything with the fired lead bullets?
I was.
All right. What were you able to do? What conclusions, if any, did you make?
After microscopic comparison of the fired bullets to test shots from the firearm, items 5A, 5B, and 17 were identified as having been fired from People's Exhibit 191.
Actually, 127.
127.
The one with the H.
Too many stickers.
I know. Okay, so the recovered shell casings were fired from the P-22, Walther P-22.
This is a .22 caliber Walther P-22 model, yes.
Okay. And the recovered lead fragments that you were given, those you were able to compare and make the determination that they, in fact, were fired from that Walther P-22 as well.
Correct. I would call them more of a fired lead bullet versus a fragment, though.
Yes, sir. Okay. And again, anything about this laboratory in the correct copy, I should say, that's different than when you originally submitted?
Nothing else was corrected other than the agency abbreviation.
Okay. And it bears your signature, obviously?
It does.
Okay. Now, I'm going to switch gears on you, just laboratory gears, if you will. This is going to be GR 162492 and record number 6.
That's going to be exhibit 162.
162, yes, sir. Okay. Handing you that laboratory report. Is that a report that you authored, sir?
Yes, it is.
And essentially, what are we looking at in this report?
These basically reflect the same results that I wrote in the previous report that we talked about. Because this is a different laboratory number, I write reports for each, and the results are going to be the same.
Okay. Well, is it safe to say that the recovered shell casings and fired lead bullets were recovered by one agency under one complaint number, and the suspect firearm was recovered by, I think, the same agency, just under a different complaint number?
That's correct.
All right.
So that generates two different lab numbers for us.
So when a police complaint number comes in, that generates a new lab number for you?
Each agency and their complaint number has to be under a unique lab identifier. So even though they may be related somehow, however the agency submits that evidence, if it's under a different complaint number, it has to be under a different laboratory number.
Okay. Okay. But essentially, this report mirrors what we just talked about in Record 25.
It does mirror the results, yes.
Okay. All right, I'm handing you two. One is already admitted exhibit 132H, and then your report, this is marked as People's Exhibit 163H. Give me 1 second here. That's record number. Record number 11. What's this lab report telling us?
On this lab number and record number, a firearm was submitted, and this is the result of examining that firearm.
And is that firearm contained within this exhibit?
Yes, it is.
All right. And that's a 380 Bersa, is that correct?
It's yes, a 380 auto caliber Bersa.
Okay. And is this common in, I think you had talked about this a little bit in the opening of your testimony, this lab report is telling us what?
Basically, with this firearm, all I did was test fire it and enter test shots into the NIBIN or IBIS database to see if the database could associate it to any unsolved shootings.
Okay. So essentially, and I'll just ask you, is there like a national database that this stuff goes into that other agencies can tap into?
Yes.
Basically sharing information, essentially.
Yes.
Okay. I'll take that back. Yeah, thank you. One last report here, Lieutenant. Okay. Handing you what is People's 121 and 122, two unfired cartridges. Did you have an opportunity to look at those? This is going to be record number 12.
12, yes. Yes, I did examine these two unfired cartridges.
What number is that? 4?
164. Yes, sir. Give you that. Hold on a second. Okay. And what, if any, conclusions could you make as far as this comparison is concerned?
The conclusions I made was that there were no tool marks on these two items that were sufficient that I could use for comparison purposes to either a firearm or other fired evidence.
And I noticed that you don't have this on your report, and I'm going to ask you this. Did you make any specific notation or observation, whether it be visually or under the microscope, that made these unfired rounds look as though they've been weathered or exposed to the elements?
The only thing that I indicated in my notes is that they were damaged and may have been run over because they are dented and deformed.
So nothing in your examination that would indicate being exposed to the elements for long periods of time where it would be corroded or show those signs?
They did not appear corroded to me.
Okay. And did that include both, you may have said this already and I apologize, did that include both a naked eye view of it as well as a microscopic view of it?
As far as whether there was corrosion present?
Yeah.
Naked eye, obviously, as I recall it, again, I didn't see any corrosion at all. It's just that they were damaged as far as it being dented and deformed slightly. Under the comparison scope, I couldn't really tell you. I didn't make those notations. So I can't tell you if I saw any there microscopically or not.
Okay. And I'm assuming, Lieutenant Crump, that in your 20-plus years of work and the thousands of cases you've done, have you come across a situation where you've seen a bullet that's been exposed to the elements, weathered or corroded?
Yes.
And I'm assuming you know what that looks like versus what it doesn't look like.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Your Honor, I would move for the admission of First People's Exhibit 59 through 61. Those are the photographs.
No objection to the photograph.
Exhibits 59 through 61 are received.
I'd move for the admission of Exhibit 159, which is Record 3, which with the on-the-record correction of the clerical error.
.159 is ballistics record what?
Record 3.
Okay.
Your Honor, what here?
Yes.
Lieutenant Crump, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Couple questions. Well, not a couple questions. Questions about the records that you've drafted, your work there. A couple of those records, when they were shown on the screen, I don't know if that's the case with the final documents we're admitting, but a couple of records were shown with highlighting on them. Do you remember seeing that when you looked at them?
Yes.
Did you put any of the highlighting on any of those documents?
Generally, when I make a correction, I will highlight the corrected copy
Okay.
that's at the top. Then I will highlight what it is I corrected, and then I'll highlight the bottom statement that says this reflects this is a corrected copy.
Okay. But other than that, if there were highlighting that we saw, that was to aid the viewer in directing their attention, but that's not something you put on the documents. Is that correct?
I did not highlight that.
Thank you. I have no further questions on that issue, and I don't have any objections to the documents that Lieutenant Crump is authoring.
Okay, so that would include, Judge, Exhibits 159, 160, 161, 162, 163, and 164.
That's correct, John.
All right, will all be received.
Give me 1 second. I have no further questions of this witness.
Okay. Counsel, would you bring up Exhibit 12 for us, please?
Sure will.
Or at least number 2. Yeah, I guess. I think that's this one. Okay. Zoom, please. Is
Yes,
it another
sir.
bullet? Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Lieutenant Crump, good afternoon again. Taking a look at that bullet, I assume that's what it is?
It's what we would call a cartridge.
Okay. Cartridge is, you've seen them as they come out of the box, I would assume.
Yes.
Is that a pristine cartridge? Is that how they look when they come out of the box?
No.
Okay. Now, that cartridge what materials is that made of?
The
The exterior, anyway.
the cartridge case is brass,
Okay.
and the bullet seated in it is going to be lead with a copper coating.
Okay. So is there? Is there anything about those materials that are special or different than what we might normally come across if we see that same material out in, maybe in lawn furniture or something else?
Well,
Let me restate. Is there anything about that material that makes them corrode faster or slower than we would normally find in that particular type of material?
I don't really know. I can't really answer that because these could be certain alloys, so there's certain mixtures of metals in there, and additionally, firearm manufacturers are proprietary about their coatings on these, especially the bullet. I don't know the mixture of alloy they use in that copper coating.
You noticed, you testified that you didn't notice any corrosion on that particular bullet, on the bullets that you saw, correct?
Correct.
But if we had a witness who said he saw a spot of green on it, would you disagree, or is that simply he might have noticed it and you didn't?
I would not disagree. I would say maybe it was there, but I did not notice it.
Thank you. I have no further questions on that particular issue. The next issue I'd ask you about are your reports. You did reports of ballistics and whatnot for us, correct?
Yes.
And in those reports, I noticed usually there's a line in there that says victim in your reports. And I noticed as they were being projected, I noticed Rebecca Bletch's name, and I noticed Madison Nygaard's name, and I noticed that some didn't have a victim listed at all. What I didn't notice was the name Jessica Herringa. Are any of your reports with the name Jessica Herringa on them?
I'll have to look, sir.
Please take a look.
No, sir.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned when you first opened your testimony that you've been found to be an expert witness at least 125 times.
Yes.
That's correct?
Yes.
And you work for the state police, is that correct?
Yes.
So that's your employer? Of the 125 times that you've been called and certified as an expert witness, how many times were you called by the defense side?
I hesitate to answer. It may have been twice, but I can't say for sure because it's not something I keep track of.
Thank you. You mentioned that the Bertha, the handgun?
Bursa.
Thank you.
Yes.
You checked it against the National Register to see if it was involved in any other, if it had been cited in the registry. Was it in fact cited or not?
So when the test shot from a firearm goes into our IBIS system, it will only search the Michigan database unless we tell it to search elsewhere. So unless we have information that maybe the suspect travels frequently goes to Illinois, then we can search an Illinois database. But
Okay.
within the Michigan database, no, there were no hits.
Thank you. One more. Part of my approach, Lieutenant. Okay. Lieutenant, would you take a look at and I took it away from you as soon as I asked you to take a look at it, didn't I? Exhibit 159H, report number 3, second page for me, please. The top of the report, it lists the objects that you reviewed.
You mean some of the items?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, some of the items are listed there at the top of that page, yes.
You say some or what under normal practice, if you were given a package of stuff to review, wouldn't you list all of them or would just list some of them?
There are more on the first page.
Okay. So The ones that are listed there on top are what? The ones I'm referring to?
Which items is what you're asking me?
No, yes, I guess, let's try that, see if that answers the question.
Okay, so the items listed on the top of page 2 are the fired bullets, 15A and 15B, 2 fragments, which items 15C, and another fired lead bullet, which is item 17.
Okay, a total of how many items?
4.
Are there any other bullets or bullet fragments or items associated with bullets in that report?
Well, there are fired cartridge cases
Okay, the cases, the outside, okay,
on the first page,
okay.
and numerous firearms also on the
Okay.
first page.
So the cartridge and firearms, but other than that, in terms of fragments and pieces of bullets, the ones you read for us were the only ones that are part of that package, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and there are a total of how many items total?
Of just the fired bullets or fragments?
That's correct, sir.
4.
4, not 6, not 7, 4.
4.
Thank you. Okay, how many, maybe I want to make sure I'm clear. How many fragments are we talking about total?
The way I describe them in
Yes,
the
sir.
report?
Yes, sir.
2.
Okay. And the top group of, how do you describe those? There are 2 sections. There's the one where the 2 fragments, but above there's a list of 3 other items. Is that correct? Why don't I point to them and then you'll know what I'm talking about? That would be helpful. These items here.
The first 2
Okay,
are fired bullets.
okay. And then the one after that is what?
The second one
Yes.
has the same item number, and I gave that the designation of 2 fragments
Okay.
within that item number.
Okay. So the first one is 1 bullet, then 2 fragments, so we got three items altogether so far. Keep going down, let's count them off.
And then one more item, item 17, which is another fired lead bullet.
Which is 4 altogether.
4 items,
Okay.
which encompasses 3 fired bullets and 2 fragments.
Okay. 3 fire bullets, okay. 3 fire bullets and 2 fragments. So, altogether 5 items. 3 fire bullets and 2 fragments. By my count, by way I'm describing.
Well, I'm saying 4 items because those 2 fragments I gave the same item number,
All right, but certainly not 7.
not 7.
Do you know which photograph that is? Okay. That's it, it's just blown up. It's just that's this one. That's fine. That's just what you look at. Ms. Nielsen? Yeah. This is the one we're, it's number 134 on the slide. Right. I don't have it. Oh, I don't have it. All right, let's do this the old-fashioned way then. By the way, Lieutenant, are you okay? Do you need a break or you need water or anything?
I'm good.
All right. May I approach your honor? Do you recognize this particular document, Lieutenant?
I do.
Can you explain to us what that is?
This is a general picture of items 15A, 15B, and 15C, along with the label of the package it was submitted in.
Okay. And those are the items you've been talking about this afternoon, some of them?
Yes.
Okay. Let's put a sticker on that, shall we? We'll call that proposed exhibit C. All right. Now, Lieutenant, what I'm most interested in is those two smaller objects to the side there. There are two larger ones and the two smaller ones off against the right side. Do you know what materials those objects are made of?
In my notes, I indicate that one appears to be consistent with lead, and the other one looks like maybe a piece of stone or asphalt.
Can you tell us which is which? The one reading from left to right?
I can't tell in the picture, no.
Okay. Is that part of what you received and were asked to review?
Yes.
And now, is that document, who created this document? Did you make this photograph and the card underneath it?
I did.
All right. So, if I understand it as, of the two smaller objects, one of them is a piece of gravel, concrete, something like that?
It could be, yes.
Okay. Under the evidence locker, and I'll show it to you, where there's a description of the objects, it says bullet fragments. Is that your writing?
No.
Okay, that's someone else filled out the card and then sent it to you. Is that correct?
This probably would have been who collected the evidence
Okay.
at the scene and filled out that label at the scene.
All right. All right. That being the case, I move to admit defense exhibit C, Your Honor.
Probably, that's fine.
That will be received?
May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
Again, Lieutenant, what your explanation was, the two smaller objects, one is a bullet fragment, the other is a piece of, your word, gravel, tar,
Well,
stone,
if
something.
you want me to be more specific, I can go to the
I don't think
results.
just a general.
So I don't recall calling it a bullet fragment. What I said, it appears to be consistent with a piece of lead,
Okay.
which could be from, broken off from one of the fired bullets. The other piece, under the microscope, appeared to be more like a small stone or maybe something broken off from the roadway, as you can see in the picture that is showing right now.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Sure.
Lieutenant, would you take a look at this particular document, please?
Sure.
Sorry, I thought I came around, so here we go. Well, I think she can listen and watch at the same time. So, I've shown you another document, another photograph, and some objects and a card underneath. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that a document you produced?
Yes.
What, can you describe to the jury what that particular document shows?
This shows a view of item 17, which is a fired bullet. One view indicates the label from, I believe, the doctor or pathologist underneath the picture of the bullet. Then a closer-up picture of the bullet with a scale in it, and then the label that was on the envelope that this item was received in.
Okay. I'm curious about that, it's not even rectangular, but the more rectangular two of the two objects there. Do you recall what that object is? What did you determine it to be?
Just a piece of lead that appears to have been broken off of that larger portion of bullet.
All right. Now, the description on the original label, the blue label underneath, there's a caption that says a piece of bobby pin, I believe is the wording they use. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I can see that, yes.
Okay. As the descriptor of one of the objects in that particular package, do you agree with that rectangular thing is a piece of bobby pin, or the circular thing is a piece of bobby pin?
So the bobby pin is probably within that container, and I wouldn't have photographed that. So that, what you're seeing in this picture, does not contain that bobby pin.
Okay. So there may have been a bobby pin in the container, but you didn't photograph that?
No, I have no reason to.
Okay. Pardon me? Can you explain then why that's listed as bullet fragment as opposed to bullet fragments?
I didn't write that, sir, so I don't know why it was written that way.
So whoever wrote that up wrote it as bullet fragment, singular, and bobby pin, correct?
Yes.
And what you photographed there is two bullet fragments, is that correct? And no bobby pin?
What I photographed was the main portion of a fired bullet and then a small fragment that was probably collected with that bullet.
And no bobby pin, correct?
Again, there may be a bobby pin within that container, but I didn't photograph it.
That's a good point. You said there may be. I imagine you've done a couple of these since you did this.
A couple
A couple of these forensic evaluations. The things you do as an expert.
You mean the number of cases that I completed
That's
after
what I'm
I looked at this?
Yes, sir.
Numerous, yes.
So do you have any independent recollection of this particular bit of evidence to give you a firm idea of whether or not you saw a bobby pin in this particular package?
Vaguely.
Vaguely?
I can't say for sure, but vaguely. Yes, there could have been a bobby pin within that, and I just elected not to photograph it because it wasn't a piece of fired evidence.
Got it. Your Honor, I move for admission of Defense Exhibit D.
No objection.
Permission to,
Okay, that's E.
D. D is in
D
David,
is in
Your Honor.
dog. Okay, D is in,
Permission to publish.
okay.
Lieutenant, do you recall the date that you took those photographs that are passing around there? Exhibit C and D? Do you have that listed somewhere?
The date that I created the worksheet for that bullet is July 10th of 2014, so it was probably that day.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Do you recall what's in that photograph I just showed you, Exhibit D, or do you need to have it back before I ask you a question?
I have a copy here.
Cool. All right. That would have been in container 17, correct? Where that came from? Exhibit 3?
Yes, that was container 17.
Cool. I'm looking at your record 3, Lieutenant,
Mhm.
and as I recall, there are 2 objects in that photograph, but your record 17 says item, 1 fired lead bullet.
Mhm.
Can you explain why there are 2 items in the photograph?
Mhm. It's common if a bullet is submitted in a container and it is just a fragment. Let's say it's a fragmented, they call it a fragmented bullet. I will
Okay.
treat that as one item and just call it a fragmented bullet or a
Yes.
fired bullet.
Okay, so if it had busted up into 50 fragments, you'd still call it 1 bullet?
I have at times. Other times I will call it a fragmented bullet.
Okay.
But a lot of times I will not say this contains 3 lead fragments and 6 copper jacket fragments.
Understood. And also on the container 17, there's no indication there of a part of a bobby pin either. Is that correct?
Correct.
One moment. Lieutenant Crum, thank you very much. I have no further questions.
You're welcome.
Just a couple quick follow-ups. Lieutenant, I'm assuming that you didn't, as part of your analysis, analyze the piece of gravel.
No, we can't. So what I'll do, if we have small fragments, we're going to look at them under a microscope to try to determine basically what it is, and we can generally do that. So if it's not a piece of fired evidence or it's too small to even do anything with, then our examination stops.
Well, that's my next question. I mean, you know, obviously, when you go to the store and you buy a box of ammunition, there are usually 50 very nice, clean bullets in that box. But when the bullet is fired, it goes through a deformity process. Is that right? I mean, it's being deformed as it's running down the barrel.
Well, it's deformed in the sense that it's going to, the land and groove impressions on the inside of the barrel are going to impress in the surface of the bullet, yes.
And then depending on what surface it hits, it goes through another process of deformity, if you will.
Yes.
And that includes things like, you know, asphalt, wood, skull, bone.
Yes.
Bone has the ability of essentially fragmenting a bullet, is that correct?
Yes.
And if I understood your testimony, then the little pieces may have some value to it, but typically you want, the bigger the piece, the better, essentially?
A small fragment with no land and groove impressions on it is not useful to us because we can't use it for comparison purposes.
So the items that you use to make your comparisons and your conclusions in the reports that we went through had enough sufficient landing grooves and impressions for you to make the conclusions in?
The individual characteristics within those impressions, yes.
Okay. And those are the items that you used, and any item that didn't have that sufficiency, you did not use.
Right.
And is it safe to say, Lieutenant, that a person shot in the roadway, or let me ask it this way, would you be surprised whether or not there would be a small piece of gravel given a victim being shot in the roadway and being at one point down head up in dirt and gravel that shot?
Well, I think that depends on a number of factors as to how I could answer that. So if the person at the scene collecting the evidence, being that it was a small, very small object, maybe they didn't see it very well and easily could have collected that as something they thought was important but turned out not to be.
that's the reason why we have the Michigan State Police Crime Lab, right? To help us make those determinations.
Well, most people don't have microscopes out at the scene, so if you could have that at a scene and look at something that small, then you could make that determination at the scene.
Fair enough. Thank you. I have nothing else.
Nothing further this witness, Your Honor. Thank
Okay.
you.
Call the next witness.
Thank you, Judge. The people of the state of Michigan.
Oh, wait a minute, the jury needs a break.
Okay, then.
Signal they want a break.
So-
We'll take a 10-minute break.
Green light here, Judge. I'm sorry, we were having a side conversation. People of the state of Michigan called Dakota Dreyer to the stand.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Please have a seat. State your name for the record.
My name is Dakota Quail Dyer.
Give me just 1 second here, Dakota.
Yes, sir.
I'll be ready to roll.
Need to hand spell his name too. Start-
Oh, can you spell your first and last name?
First name's Dakotah. Last name's Quail-Dyer.
Do you mind if I just call you Mr. Dyer?
That's fine.
Is that okay? Sir, could you describe, or at least, describe your relationship with Jessica Harrington?
I was her boyfriend at the time.
And it's a good answer because I didn't really give you some context. And I want to focus in on that time frame of 2013, April, in particular April of 2013. So in April of 2013, your relationship with Jessica was what?
We lived together. She was my girlfriend, also the mother of my child.
So and your child was a boy or a girl?
A boy.
So that boy was your son?
Correct.
And her son?
Correct.
Okay. Now, at the time, or around this time frame, do you recall Jessica working at the Exxon gas station on Sternberg?
Yes, I do.
And do you remember, sir, about when she started working there?
I want to say July, June, middle of the year or so.
2012?
You're right. I do believe it was the previous year in 2012, to be honest, yes.
Okay. And did she have a regular shift that she would work? I mean, was there...
She tended to work the night shifts. She would occasionally work mornings, but mostly nighttime.
And do you recall, Mr. Dyer, the time that shift started and the time that shift ended?
If she was closing, I do believe the store closed around 11 o'clock.
Okay. So was this Exxon station, this wasn't one that was a 24-hour?
No, sir. No.
It had a definite closing time.
Correct.
Now, during this time frame, and again, during the time frame, let me ask you this. What time when did you and Jessica start living together?
We had been living together for a few years.
Okay.
She had stayed with me at a previous house, and then we were in that house for about a year and a half, 2 years, I want to say.
Okay. And did this coincide with the birth of your child, or were you living together prior to that?
No, we were not living together prior to that. It was about within the first year of his life that we moved in together.
Okay. And in 2013, how old was that young man?
3.
3?
Yep.
Now, during this time frame that you were living together, were you working or not working?
At the time of the incident, I was not working, but I was working previous to that. I was just on unemployment at that current time.
Okay. So, putting in context, as you were living together, you were employed at some part of that living together, but as we got to April of 2013, you were unemployed.
I was unemployed from November in 2012 to that point, yes.
Okay.
So about 6 months.
Okay. And I didn't quite hear if you said or not, but were you receiving unemployment assistance at that time or not?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Now, how would you classify your relationship with Jessica during the time frame that you two were living together?
Rocky and on and off.
Okay. And why do you say that?
We both had jealousy issues, I guess.
Okay.
Sometimes we fight, break it off, and a few months later we'd be back together.
Sure. Understand. So it was. I'm sure there were good times.
Yes.
And they were not so good times.
Correct.
Not unlike a lot of relationships, right?
Right.
Now, during that time frame, were there issues involving drugs?
Yes, we both had drug problems.
Okay.
I'm sorry, couldn't you answer, Counsel?
Yes, we did both have drug problems.
Okay. And were you protective of Jessica in that area? You understand what I'm asking you?
No,
All right, let me try to ask it a little better. Were there certain things that you did not want to see her get involved in the drug world?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what I meant by being protective of that. Can you describe for the jury, how that would make you feel if she got involved in whatever, I can't remember what drug it was.
Well, I personally took methadone, and so did she, and she would use heroin once in a while, and that was really what I tried to stop her from using. I mean, the pills were hard enough, and I just didn't want it to go any further than that, I guess.
Okay.
So I was kind of protective of her that way, I guess.
Okay. And when we talk about these,
Excuse me just a minute. We're not picking your answers up on the recording. You're talking so softly. If you could speak. Considerably louder, okay?
okay, consider it louder. Now, importantly, I mean, the recording is important, but the jury needs to hear it too.
Okay.
Okay, so pretend like you're talking to them so they can hear you.
Okay.
All the way back here in the corner. Okay?
Yep.
Now, I think you'd indicated that you would get somewhat protective of Jessica involving the heroin issue. Is that right?
Correct.
Now, I guess to what extreme? How would you be protective of her in that regard?
We fought a lot about it. There was times where I flushed things down the toilet and called said person that she was getting it from and threatened them, I guess.
Okay. So you were that serious about it?
Yeah.
And okay, I want to focus in on April 26th, 2013. Okay,
Yes, sir.
it's a Saturday, and do you recall Jessica having to work that particular night?
Yes, she worked about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Went in.
Okay. Now, prior to that, just if we could kind of go through your day a little bit. Prior to that, did you guys spend any time together?
We went shopping, and then she dropped me off at my parents' house before work.
Okay. And was there anybody else with you?
Evan was with us.
And that was your son?
Yes.
And do you recall, sir, about what time that Jessica dropped you guys off at your parents' house?
I want to say like 2:30ish, 2:30ish.
Okay. Now, obviously, Jessica did not stay with you for dinner. Is that correct?
No, it was just she just dropped me off, and then she went to work, and me and my son stayed there to eat dinner with my family.
Okay. Now, could you describe for the jury, sir, the things that you and Jessica shared, i.e., vehicles and whatnot? What did you share amongst the two?
We shared a Mercury Sable, and we also shared a cell phone at the time.
Okay. And so, on this particular day, in the afternoon, when she dropped you and your son off, did you keep the car or did she?
She took the car, dropped me off at home or at my parents' house, and then I kept the cell phone so I would have it at home just in case anything would happen.
Was that I'm assuming then you didn't have a landline?
No.
Cell phone was your only way of communication?
Correct.
I want you to take a look at People's Exhibit 81. Can you see that okay?
Yes, sir.
And can you describe what that is, please?
That was the car we shared at the time.
Okay, so back in 2013, this was the vehicle that you and Jessica had in common.
Correct.
Okay.
What number is that?
That's 81.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Dyer, Was it common when Jessica went to work at night, would she wear a hooded sweatshirt?
I would say most of the time, yes, because she would have to fill the coolers, so she always kept it, even if it was warm outside, to work in the coolers
Okay.
at the Exxon.
And was that part of like the closing? Were there some closing duties that were
Stocking the shelves, keeping the coolers full, so then people in the morning didn't have to do it, clean
Okay.
up.
Okay. Was she a hooded sweatshirt person? I mean, some folks like the crew neck, some folks, like V-necks.
She liked hoodies, yes.
Okay. Now, were you able to talk to her on the phone that particular day or that night?
I had called her about 8 o'clock once I got back to our house, just to let her know I was back. And then I called her around 9:30, 10 o'clock to ask her to bring some milk and a few other things home. And that was the last time I talked to her.
Okay. So that kind of answered my next couple of questions here. So once at 8 p.m.
Yes,
and then once at 10 p.m.
right around 10, yes.
Okay, or around 10, I'm sorry. I think that's what you said. When you talked to her at, let's take it one at a time. When you talked to her at 8 o'clock, was there anything in her voice that made you feel uncomfortable, or that she seemed troubled or worried or anything?
No, her usual sunny disposition, so she was very happy.
He's not talking any longer than this before.
You gotta speak up.
No, nothing seemed wrong. She was happy.
Okay. Did she mention to you anything about being bothered by anyone? And I'm sticking with the 8 o'clock time frame. Being bothered by anyone around that 8 o'clock hour?
No, sir.
Fast forwarding to the conversation you had around 10 o'clock that night. Again, I'll ask you the same question. Anything in her voice or demeanor that suggested to you that there was something wrong?
No.
Did she mention anything about, again, at that point in time, being bothered or somebody creeping her out or anything of that nature?
No, sir.
All right. How would you classify or how would you rate the relationship that Jessica had with her son?
A 10, being good. It's a very good relationship. She loved him very much.
Obviously you spent more time with her and your son than any of us. Did she ever express a desire that she wished she never had your son?
Not to me, no.
Did you ever get the sense that she didn't want anything to do with your son?
No.
Was there any fear whatsoever that you experienced or saw where you felt that she just didn't want to be a mom anymore?
No.
You feel that she would just have upped and left, leaving her son behind?
Leaving her son behind, no.
Is there any scenario or possibility that you've experienced in your relationship with Jessica Herringa that would give you that inclination?
No.
Was she the type of person, or do you get the impression that she was the type of person that would just get up and leave and not tell anybody anything?
No.
She's got a family, correct?
She's very close. She was very close with her sister and pretty close with her mother. If anybody, I do believe she would have told her sister she was leaving.
Okay. As you sit there today, sir, have you heard either directly to you or to anybody related to Jessica about her whereabouts?
No.
Nobody's reached out to you via phone or internet or anything of that?
No, sir.
Would it be typical of her to leave well, let me ask you this. Even though she was working and you were unemployed at the time of receiving assistance, were you guys doing, really well or just getting by?
We were getting by.
Kind of paycheck to paycheck kind of thing?
Yeah.
All right. And give me one second, Mr. Dyer. Give me 1 second. We've got one last question for her, and I hate to ask this, but I've got to. Mr. Dyer, did you have anything to do with her disappearance?
No, I did not.
Are you involved at all in the disappearance of Jessica Herring?
No, I'm not.
All right. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Dyer.
What are you doing?
My name is Fred Johnson. I'd like to ask you a few more questions. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Dyer, you're a soft-spoken guy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand over here, because that way I know if I can hear your answer, this last juror over here can hear it as well, okay?
Okay.
And if it's a little soft, if it isn't clear or something like that, what I'll do is I'll tap my ear and that's your signal to speak up a little bit. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, let's give that a try to see how that works. Mr. Dyer, this was a very difficult time, an occasion for you, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Dyer, I promise you, I may ask some questions that may be painful to you, but I won't ask you anything that I don't absolutely have to know, okay?
Okay.
Okay. And we'll go from there. Let's start with an easy one. You mentioned your son's name, correct?
Yes.
Would you spell your son's name for, because it's an unusual spelling, correct?
Why do I have to spell my son's name?
Because you mentioned it on the record, and I just want, because when they type it up, they want to know how to spell it. That's all. Is that okay?
It's Zevyn.
Okay. Thank you. We don't need to know anything else about it.
Okay.
All right. Now, this is your son and Jessica's son, correct?
Yes.
And you have another daughter, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And she's older than your son?
Yes.
Is this other daughter with Jessica?
No.
All right. This is with another lady?
Yes.
And were the two of you married?
Me and my daughter's mother?
Yes, sir.
No.
All right. Now, you mentioned that your relationship with Jessica was, I apologize, Miss Herringa. Your relationship with Miss Herringa was that you were boyfriend and girlfriend, basically, correct?
Correct.
But weren't you also engaged for a time? Didn't you ask her to marry you on a couple occasions?
Yes,
All right.
I did.
So it was you had a child together and you asked at least twice to marry her. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Was there any planning ever done for that wedding?
More wishful, I guess, hoping.
Okay.
She never really gave me a specific answer.
All right. You had you had a relationship where the two of you are trying to make a family with your son, correct?
Yes.
And there were some difficulties. Am I correct?
Correct.
One of them was money.
I wouldn't say that was a problem, but yeah, money was tight.
Okay. You were unemployed for, would you say, 6 months during the course of that relationship?
Correct.
And you were receiving unemployment.
Correct.
And was Ms. Herringa employed during the entire time you were together, or the periods where she wasn't employed?
She was, from the time our son was born, she didn't really work until the last 6-7 months before her disappearance.
So that made it stressful, I assume, given the money situation was.
Yeah.
And when she did start working, she worked at a gas station.
Correct.
Do you know what her hourly wages were at the gas station? Was it minimum wage?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, no.
Okay. But it wasn't a high-paying job. Would you agree?
Correct.
All right. So, at the time that you last saw her, were you both working at that time?
No.
Okay. She was working, but you were not yet.
Correct.
All right. All right. And you mentioned that part of the competing for income, I assume, was a drug situation.
I don't, can you rephrase that, please?
Did you tell Mr. Hilson that you were using methadone?
Yes,
Did you tell Mr. Hilson that Ms. Herringa was using methadone?
yes,
Did you tell Mr. Hilson that Ms. Herringa also used heroin?
correct,
And I assume none of that stuff is free?
correct.
Were there other drugs involved? Cocaine, methamphetamine, alcohol, marijuana, anything else?
Marijuana,
All right. And all that's competing with, for your income, correct?
Correct.
Marijuana's not free either, correct?
correct.
And I've heard very few individuals tell me that using drugs helps a relationship. That it causes more friction within the relationship. Did you find that to be the case?
Definitely.
Okay. Did Ms. Herringa have a second child?
No,
This was her first child?
correct.
How old was she when she had your son?
22, 23,
Okay, so from my point of view, still a young person.
correct.
Okay. And I understand that she was close with her sister,
Yes,
but in terms of family support from her side of the family, were her mom and sister or her grandmother over helping and giving advice and providing counseling and babysitting and all that stuff?
her mom would help once in a while. If you're asking if they were at her house on a daily basis helping take care of her son, no.
No. Okay. You mentioned that on a scale of 1 to 10, Ms. Herringa had a relationship with her son that was a 10.
Correct.
How would you characterize her relationship with her mother?
My relationship with her mother or
No,
her?
sir, hers.
It was a good relationship also. I would say 8, 9.
Okay.
They had their rocky moments, but
And there's also a grandmother involved, correct?
yeah.
Okay. How would you rate their relationship?
They lived in Grand Rapids, so we only kind of seen them on holidays, but every time we seen them was very loving.
Okay. So they had a good relationship with your grandmother as well?
Correct.
Okay. And there are also people who are significant in the home. Your daughter, I would assume, would come to visit?
Yes.
How would you rate their relationship, Ms. Herringa and your daughter?
It was good. They got along.
The number?
I would say an 8.
Okay. And your former significant other, your daughter's mother. I assume that since the daughter was coming over, Ms. Herringa and your daughter's mother would have contact on occasion?
Limited contact, but yes.
Okay. And how close were they, would you say?
They did not get along.
Were there other folks, you mentioned the sister has a good relationship, were there other folks that were within the nucleus of that family that you were trying to put together, that were people that you were involved in on a regular basis?
My family, my mom, dad, brother, sister, her family. That's about it. I really kind of just kept to the family.
Okay. Tell me about what you know of Ms. Herringa's what did she think of her was she satisfied in her job? Did she get along well at the job as far as you know?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay. There wasn't a point of friction within the job?
Not to my knowledge.
So she wouldn't come home and say, you know, that so-and-so, she's giving me a hard time again today, or anything along those lines?
Just regular, everybody gets frustrated at work. Just regular daily venting, I guess. Nothing specific stands out.
All right. So, thank you. On the issue of the drug use, you mentioned that you knew the person who was supplying Jessica. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be informal. Ms. Herringa, you knew the person who was supplying her with heroin.
I did not personally know him. I only knew him from a phone number and a brief conversation on the phone I had with him. I've never physically seen him or met him. It was just literally a 45-second conversation where I was screaming at him on the phone.
How'd you know it was him that was supplying her then?
Text messages in the phone.
Okay.
I kind of pieced it together.
He was sending text messages to her? Yes?
Yes, sir.
All right. And so you were able to call and let him know what you thought about that?
Correct.
All right. So in other words, well, let's be blunt. She didn't need you to get her heroin. She had her own source.
Correct.
You know how many sources she had?
I do not. Some she kept from me.
Do you know how often she used?
I do not.
Do you have any idea what the guy looked like? I assume it was a guy.
Yeah,
You know what he looked like?
no.
All right. You mentioned that as a result of the drugs, that the two of you fought a lot.
Yes.
Okay. Was she any happier about your drug use than you were about hers?
I would say no.
She wanted you to stop using or stop using as much, or
We had both talked about stop using altogether.
did she ever have to flush any of your marijuana down the toilet?
No.
There were fights, and I assume drugs were part of it, but there were fights about other issues. Did you argue about chores,
Yeah, any couple will.
babysitting duties, and who had to do what, that sort of thing?
Not necessarily babysitting and chores, I would agree with, yes.
Did she ever complain to you about you're not providing enough interaction with your son, your son?
Yes,
There was also, you also mentioned there were, that you're off and on. Were there times that you moved out, or that she moved out, or?
before we lived together, it was very off and on. And once we cohabited the house, I would say it was on. There was no choice. We really, either one of us didn't have nowhere to go.
Do you, I'm relating back, because I just remembered a question I forgot to ask you. Do you remember a situation where Ms. Herringa was pregnant with your son, and her mother put her out of the house?
Yes.
She was living with her mother at the time?
Yep.
Okay, and this is the mom who has 8 or 9?
Yep.
Okay. So, okay. There's all kinds of fights, ranging from not talking to just screaming and beyond. Do you recall if you and Ms. Herringa, did it ever become physical between the two of you?
One time it did become physical, yes.
And I hopefully finally on this line of questioning, you mentioned that you mentioned that she had a 10 out of 10 relationship with your son.
Correct.
All right. Did she ever mention to you that she thinks your son has your temper?
No.
Okay. You mentioned jealousy issues.
Correct.
To your mind, I mean, were they both ways? She questioned your fidelity and you questioned hers?
Yes.
In your hearts of heart right now, do you think you are accurate? Do you think there's a reason for you to be upset in terms of her fidelity?
Can you clarify?
Do you think there was somebody else?
No.
You don't think so?
I think she was talking to other people. I don't think there was somebody else in a relationship with her, no.
Okay.
I feel she may have been talking and flirting with people, yes.
Okay. So when you say people, you mean plural, more than one.
I don't have specifics, so I say people.
You noticed her text messaging, though, correct? That's how you found out about the heroin dealer?
Yes.
Did you notice any text messages that led you to believe that there's a problem? Well, there's a fidelity issue here?
No.
Did Ms. Herringa keep what I call a journal? You know what I'm talking about? A journal,
Yes.
a diary, that sort of thing?
Yes, she did.
And would you describe it for us, please?
It's a journal.
Is it a notebook or is it?
It's an actual journal, like a book.
Okay, and is cover on it and everything?
Yeah.
And does it say my journal or my diary on the front?
Not to my knowledge, no. I
When
think
did
it was
you
just a leather binding book.
Okay, when did you discover it?
I've known about it the whole time she was writing in it.
So you saw her writing in this document?
Correct.
Okay. Did you ever take the opportunity to look in the document to see what was being said?
Not until after she was gone.
Okay. After she was gone, did you look through the document at least to see what she was saying?
I thumbed through it, yes.
Are you familiar with Ms. Herringer's handwriting?
Yes.
Was there anyone's handwriting in that document other than Ms. Herringer's?
Not to my knowledge, no.
All right. So are you, when, you know better than any of us, are you convinced that that is in fact her journal?
Yes, I am.
And she was keeping information, she'd write things in there?
Yes.
Okay. What happened to the journal?
I turned it over to police, and then they did what they needed to do with it, and then they gave it back to me, and I'm not quite sure where it is right now, to be
Okay.
honest.
But you did let law enforcement know that you had this document?
Correct.
All right. Mr. Dwyer, during Mr. Hilson's opening, he mentioned that Ms. Herringer had $400 cash in her purse. I think that's what he said. I may be wrong, but let's assume that is correct for now. Do you know why she had that much money in her purse?
She just cashed her check, and I do believe that was rent money.
Okay. That would have been was that the amount for your apartment?
No, a little less than rent, but
Okay. Now, this place, I assume you and Ms. Herringer lived in your own, and your son lived in your own place?
correct.
Okay. Did you have another place to go if you were to lose that place? That you could live independently with your son?
No.
Okay. So you would have needed that rent money or to keep the roof over your head for you and your son, correct?
Yes, but I knew the landlord, so there would be times where we didn't have rent money, and they would let us slide by, and, you know what I mean? We worked out. I've known the landlord I was living with for several years, so sometimes rent would not be paid, you know?
Would he let you make it up if it was late?
Yeah,
But in the end, that's what you did. In the end, you caught up with it, correct?
correct.
I assume that you approved of how Ms. Herringer mothered your son.
Yeah.
Was this a difficult experience for her, given that this was her first child?
I guess I don't know what you mean.
I mean, raising an infant, 1-year-old, 2-year-old, can be frustrating for veteran parents. I mean, you do it 3 or 4 times, it's still frustrating. This was her first time. Did you notice if she found any frustrations in doing that?
No.
You didn't think she was frustrated at all?
No.
One moment, please. Mr. Dwyer, you mentioned Ms. Herringer had her cell phone. Did you know that she had a second cell phone?
I learned that in the prelim.
Okay, so after the fact?
Correct.
Okay. Were you made aware, did she say anything about taking money from the store for herself? Stealing?
Yes, I did know about that.
Okay. What did you know?
There was one point where I had confronted her after I had talked to whoever was giving her stuff. We talked about it and trying to, figure things out, and I was asking her where she was getting money to support her habit, and she said that she was, however she was doing it, taking money from the store to buy her heroin.
Thanks. I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Dwyer.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Any further, Mr. Wilson?
Give me 1 second, Jim. I have nothing else, Judge. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. You stand down and you call the next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. People of the state of Michigan call Susan Mosley to the stand.
Please raise your right hand. You swear that testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please have a seat. State your name for the record.
Susan Elliott Mosley.
Good afternoon, Ms. Mosley.
Hi.
I want to take you back to...
Elsie, can you spell that?
Oh, sure. Can you spell your last name for me?
Elliott with a space, Mosley.
Just for
Yes.
the record, so we can spell it right on the record.
That's
I want to take you back to April 26th of 2013. During that time frame, where were you working?
Sanctuary at McCully.
And what shift did you work?
I worked a split. Sometimes I was second, sometimes I was third shift.
Okay. And is that place located near the Exxon gas
No,
station?
no, it is in front of Mercy Hospital on Sherman Boulevard.
Gotcha. Let's talk about the Exxon station. Did you go there?
Yes,
And were you a frequent visitor?
I was. I lived off from Porter Road, and so that was my route to work, and it was the one place open where I could stop and get my coffee or my treats after work.
Gotcha. And again, going back to April 26th of 2013, do you recall working that particular day?
Yes.
And do you recall what time you got out of work that particular day?
The shift usually ended at 10. I had report. I can remember, I think I got out on time, but I remember my daughter was a little bit late picking me up from a volleyball practice, not sure why. And so I probably left about 10:35, maybe, something right around in there.
All right.
10:30.
And did it become a reason why you needed to stop at the Exxon station on your way home?
Yes, because I had been waiting out front, and we aren't allowed to smoke on the premises, and one of the nurses I was smoking with took my lighter home with her, and I realized it, and so then we had to stop.
Okay.
So,
Okay. When you stopped at I'm assuming your daughter picked you up,
yes,
stopped at the Exxon station on Sternberg there,
yes,
and did you go inside?
yes,
Did your daughter go inside?
no,
And when you stopped in, or when you went inside, was there anybody inside the
No.
store itself,
no,
customer-wise?
no, just Jessica.
Okay. And were you familiar with Miss Harrington?
From seeing her when I would stop in, she was usually there quite a bit in the
Okay.
evening.
And again, whether you're going to or from, you would see her? Is that, is
That's
that a
correct.
Yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, when you saw her, did any red flags or alarm bells go off or appear to you that she was any kind of distress? Or
Absolutely not. She was mopping. She was in a great mood. In fact, she was probably in a better mood than I was that evening, because she even said to me, "Hey, what's going on with you tonight?" I'm like,
Okay.
long night. We chatted for probably only 2 seconds. I can remember she said, "Are you getting candy tonight?" I said no, because that's what I usually did, and we left.
Okay. Did you end up making a purchase that night?
I bought a lighter to replace the one that someone took.
Okay. This is People's Exhibit 165. It's actually a copy of a receipt. Does that look about right?
That's, yeah.
Okay. And it's stamped on the 26th, 2013, right around 10:52 PM.
That'd be about how much time it took me to get there from McCully.
Okay. While you were there, and total, how much time do you think you were there?
Maybe 5 minutes max.
Okay.
There was one car leaving when we were pulling in. It was a four-door sedan. Couldn't tell you what kind, just a little like Honda type. They had gotten gas, and it was just us.
Okay.
We pulled in.
Anybody walk in?
No.
When you were there?
Nope.
Anybody walk in as you were leaving the store?
I don't think so, no. I don't remember passing a car or seeing another.
Okay. And I'm assuming you left without incident and
Correct.
moseyed on your way.
That's correct.
All right. Which direction did you take? You take Sternberg home?
Yeah, and then towards Porter Road.
Okay.
So is that west?
So you went west on Sternberg
Yes.
to Porter?
Yes.
Okay. Fair enough. Your Honor, I move for the omission of 165.
Received?
I have no further questions of Ms. Mosley.
Good afternoon, Ms. Mosley.
Hi.
You have the monitor there to your, I guess that's your right. You see the picture of the car on there?
Yes?
Did you see that car that night? If you remember.
I can't say. I'm sorry.
You might be sorry.
Yeah, I can't say.
We think you're doing your best. That's
Yeah.
fine. Okay. How long, did you hear about Ms. Herringer's disappearance?
It was the next morning, and I think I might have called the Norton Shores Police then, because there wasn't a time when I'm like, Kennedy and I were there. And so I called and said, I think I might have been the one that bought the lighter.
Okay. So you contacted the police the
Mhm.
next day
Yes.
to tell them that you purchased a lighter?
Yes.
that night? How sure are you about the time frame that you were there? Do you
Oh.
have any doubts in your mind?
No doubts. No doubts.
You noticed the one car, was it at the pumps? That was.
They were leaving. Yep.
They were at the pumps?
Yeah.
Okay.
hmm
Ma'am, you remember you testified at the preliminary examination, correct? In this matter?
Yes.
Long time ago?
Yes.
And at the preliminary examination, you mentioned that not on that night, but on a previous night, you'd seen somebody in the store that kind of, I don't know, was a bad vibe for you. Do you remember that?
Very much.
Tell us about that.
I had been going in there and had actually, there's a time lapse between when I went in to get the lighter. I had gone in to complain about, I gotta think of how I'm gonna, there's someone that was hanging in there that really gave me a bad vibe.
Okay.
Really bad proxemics, made me very nervous. And probably I hadn't been in the station prior to buying the lighter for a good 3 or 4 weeks because I refused to go back.
Okay.
Yeah, it was that bad. His proxemics were I wouldn't allow my female children to go in there anymore. I told everybody that would listen. He just was a creepy, creepy dude. So much so that I couldn't even get through to get to a counter to get what I needed because he would be standing in the way.
Ms. Herring does seem to have a problem. If you notice, was she there at the time? Or?
Yes, the night that, why I had stopped going in there is I had actually asked Jessica, one of the nights I was going to actually call work and stay until the place had closed down because this creepy guy was in there and he was breathing down my neck and I honestly thought like he was trying to get, I don't know, numbers off my credit card when I paid for something. I don't know what his deal was, but I had said to Jessica finally, what's this dude's deal? Do you want me to stay here? And she said, no, he's fine. And then she looked at him and said, you need to behave or you won't be able to come in here and visit with me in the evening. I thought, okay. Then that's when I went in to the store a couple days later and spoke with someone there and said, I won't be coming back in here, and this is awful, I don't know what's going on at night, but really, I'm here to get gas, and I shouldn't be intimidated. So,
That was that?
mhm.
Thank you. Oh, one more. Oh, do you remember what the type of vehicle the guy was?
I remember several vehicles, seeing them there. One was a Roto-Rooter truck I would see quite frequently there. One was a
Oh.
brown truck,
Okay, you remember the color of the Roto-Rooter truck?
white.
Okay.
The truck was brown. I would see that frequently in there, but I could not tell you what, because there was always, different people would be up there in the evening,
All right, thank you.
so I couldn't tell you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up on the creepy guy. It appeared, from your testimony, it appeared that Ms. Herringa really didn't have a problem with this person. I mean, wasn't scared of him or...
She didn't appear to be scared of him, otherwise I would have stayed that night.
Sure. Didn't, you seem to be a good judge of people. She wasn't feeling the same vibe you were feeling.
Right, but I think she understood that he was giving me a bad vibe.
Sure. Absolutely.
And,
I'm talking about Ms. Herringa.
no, she didn't seem to, and that's why it alarmed me, because I was like, you're my daughter's age, and this isn't good, you're alone.
Sure. You had a mother's instinct.
That was it.
Gotcha. Thank you. I have nothing else.
Okay. Was the gentleman, you saw this gentleman here?
No.
Thank you.
You may stand down, thank you, Mr. Willis.
People in the state of Michigan call Craig Harpster to the stand.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please have a seat. Say and spell your last name.
Craig, C-R-A-I-G, Harpster, H-A-R-P-S-T-E-R.
Good afternoon, Mr. Harpster.
Hello.
I want to take you back to April 26, 2013. Were you working at that time?
Yes, I was.
And where were you working?
GE Aviation.
And did you work a particular shift?
Yeah, I worked second shift, 3 p.m. till 11 p.m.
Okay. Now, was the Exxon gas station on Sternberg a regular stop for you?
A frequent stop, not a regular.
Okay.
As in,
When was there a particular day that you went to, or just when you needed to?
yeah, just whenever needed. I noticed on my way to work that the gas light came on, so I knew I needed to get gas that evening.
Okay. And on that particular day, on April 26, 2013, were you working your regular shift?
Yes, I was.
And when did you punch out?
11 o'clock. If I punch on at 11:01, it's overtime, and it was 11 o'clock.
So there's no question in your mind that it was 11 o'clock.
There's not a doubt in my mind.
Okay. And being a frequent visitor to the Exxon, are you familiar with how long it takes you to get there?
Yeah, by the time we walk on, I relive it every day, 5 days a week. It's about 4 minutes to get to the car, and then another 4 minutes to get to the gas station.
Okay. And on this particular night, on April 26, 2013. Sir, did you, after work, go to the Exxon station?
Yes, I did.
Now, as I think you indicated, your car needed gas.
Yes, I knew it when I went into work.
Now, are you and I don't know if this station has it or not, but can you pay at the pump, or what happened? When you got there, what'd you do?
I went to pump gas, and I was going to pay with cash, and it wouldn't activate for me. And so I waited for a couple minutes for the pump to come on, and I went back inside the store to see why I wasn't, pump wasn't activated.
Okay. And when you walked in, what did you see?
There was nobody there. Walked in, kind of hollered, "Hey, anybody here? Or, where are you?" And nothing.
Were the lights on inside the store?
Yeah, the store was definitely open.
And although they didn't activate, the pumps were on? The gas pumps?
The pumps were available pump. I think if I would have paid with a credit card, I could have just pumped and left. And
Gotcha.
not knowing anything.
Do you recall any cars parked in the parking lot?
Yeah, there was two. There was one right up by the store and then one out in
What-
front of the pumps, closer towards Sternberg Road.
Okay. Because there's like an oil change or a car
Yes,
wash?
car wash, oil change combo.
That's where you saw the other car?
It was up closer to that, yes, very close to that.
Okay. Now, looking at People's 81, right at your monitor there,
Mm-hmm.
do you recognize that vehicle as being there?
Yes, that was, that's parked exactly where it was, at the front of the store.
Okay. As you were trying to figure out where somebody was, did you explore various areas of the store itself?
Yeah, I walked around the store. There was a restroom. I frequented it quite a bit. And that door was open, and there was a cooler, and it was a L-shaped, and I actually walked in there and seen nobody.
Okay.
And proceeded behind the cash register, and there was an office there. That door was open, and nobody was in there also.
Did it appear, did you see any signs of a struggle inside the store itself?
Not at all.
Okay. Ultimately, sir, what did you end up doing?
Felt like leaving, but my gut said call 911, and that's what I did.
That's what you did?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Your Honor, it's my understanding that defense counsel and I will be stipulating to the admission of the 911 call, which is People's Exhibit 166.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay, be admitted.
All right, hang tight, Mr. Harvester here. I'm going to play this video, or the phone call.
This being 911, where's your emergency?
I don't know if it's emergency. I just got out of work. I'm at the Exxon gas station.
I'm going to stop it right there just to verify. Is that your voice, sir?
Yes, it is, sir.
Sternberg Road, kind of Sternberg and Old Grand Haven.
Okay.
And there's nobody here. Wouldn't allow me to pump gas, but I just walked inside. There's nobody. There's a car here. There's another car out in front. But it's very suspicious why there's nobody here.
So did you yell or anything, or?
Yeah, I hollered, hey, walked around the building. It's just, I don't know.
And it's still open, right?
Yeah, like when you walk in, the bell goes, ding, 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 and, the cashier's supposed to be there, but I don't see anybody, hon.
And how many vehicles did you see in the parking lot?
Well, there's one parked by the building, and then there's another one that's behind the, little SUV, DHL 2030 here. That's what there's registered number. Well, on the CKE 1725. But just in strange, I come here after work, with the aviation and come here all the time for that.
Okay, what is your name?
My name is Craig Parker.
Craig, you said it's on Sternberg, correct?
Yeah, it's on, Sternberg, it's just past the expressway.
Okay, I'm showing the address there is Exxon 1196 East Sternberg. You said just past the expressway.
Right.
Yeah, and Craig, can you spell your last name for me?
H-A-R-T-S-T-E-R.
Okay, one more time, was it H-A-R?
Parker.
What, your last name one more time, I'm sorry?
Parker, H-A-R-T-S-T-E-R.
Yes, thank you. And the phone number you're calling me from?
231-286-7556.
Okay, are you going to be staying there, or?
I can, I'm sure that if somebody's close, I think you see somebody come in and grab the run,
Okay. If you feel comfortable staying there, you do have an officer notified. Let me see where he is right now.
I'm concerned that nobody's hurt or why.
Right. It looks like we have an officer who is just north of Ohio on Grand Haven right now.
Okay. Stay there, I'm in a black Jeep. I'm right at the gas pump. You can check my gas tank, I'm still on empty, I can get no gas out of it.
Okay, like I said, he is on his way right now. If anything changes, Craig, I want you to call me right back.
Okay.
We'll send him up here, and if you feel like you have to leave, just give us a call back and let us know. Okay?
Okay, I still don't see anybody, I'm outside, so I don't see anybody.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Extent of the 911 call you had with dispatch? That was the extent of
Yes, that was it.
And ultimately, did you end up sticking around until officers arrived?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Now, while you were there waiting, or when the officers arrived, you described a Honda vehicle, and I think that was the one parked closest to the car wash oil change.
Correct.
Did the owners of that vehicle ever come back?
Yes, they were high school students from Mona Shores that were taking pictures of the train for the yearbook, and they were questioned and left.
Okay. So you actually saw that the folks that own that vehicle arrive, get in the car?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, sir. That's all I had, Judge. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's all I had.
Mr. Herbster,
Yes, sir.
good afternoon, how are you?
Good.
All right. Just a couple more questions. I've never been to that station, so when you got there, it was not obviously nighttime, correct?
11 o'clock, yes.
All right. How is that station? How is the lot lit up in that station at night? Is it well lit, or is it dark spots, or what?
It's lit with fluorescent lights.
Okay. You didn't have any trouble seeing the cars that were on the lot?
No.
The car right there, and the other car, the second car?
No.
And you didn't have any trouble seeing the pumps or anything along those lines?
No. No, sir.
All right. And had somebody come into that driveway while you were there?
Numerous did come in, and
Okay.
I just told them that nobody was in the store. It'd be best if they didn't go inside. The officer was on his way.
Okay. But that wasn't my question.
Oh.
I had a different one.
Okay.
All right. Here's my question. Did you have any trouble seeing people enter the lot, coming in and leaving the lot? In other words, was there enough light for you to do that?
Yes.
Okay. You looked around the store to see if anybody was there.
Yes, I did.
How long did you figure you looked around before you said, "Oh, this is just wrong. I'm calling 911."
Probably 3 to 4 minutes. It's a small store.
Okay. Now that particular night, you got off right at 11.
11
Yes.
o'clock. Yes,
11
sir.
o'clock. Because 11:01 is overtime.
It's overtime.
Yeah, that's not good. All right. So, do you work at your store alone? Where you work alone? Are you a sole worker that night, or were there other people working that shift as well?
Oh, there's numerous
Okay, numerous people.
that work my shift.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. And are other people checking out at 11 o'clock as well?
Everybody.
All right.
Unique. You stand and wait to punch out.
All right. And so, how do you make sure you get out at 11? If everyone's trying to get out at 11 and everybody's trying to line up, how do you make sure you get out at 11? Everybody gets out at 11.
Well, it takes you less than a second to punch out,
Okay.
and so there's numerous computers. You could probably say that 7 minutes a year I work overtime.
Okay. And so, and you got your pay after this time period, there wasn't any overtime on it, was there?
No.
All right. So there are numerous people, but there's multiple spots where you can check in and out.
Correct.
Okay. How long did you work there?
How long had I then?
At that point, 2013.
2 years.
All right. So you knew a couple of the other workers there.
Yes.
All right. Any conversations between you and them that night before you went out to your car?
No.
Anybody, hey, see you tomorrow, let's catch a beer?
It was Friday night. I was ready to go home.
Okay. So you went straight to your car without any, didn't use the restroom or get a drink of water or anything along those lines?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Hartsfield? Yes. Did you see any cars leaving when you were pulling out?
No, I did not.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
I have nothing else, Judge.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hartshorn. You can stand down.
People of the state of Michigan call Carl Warr to the stand.
Please raise your right hand. You swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please have a seat. State your name. Spell it, please.
My name is Carl Warr Jr. W-A-U-E-R. Carl with a C.
And just so that I pronounce it right, how do you pronounce your last name?
Warr.
Warr. Okay. I'll get it. Good afternoon, Mr. Warr.
Afternoon.
Do you know the defendant in this case, Jeffrey Willis?
Yes.
And is Mr. Willis present in the courtroom?
Yes.
Could you point him out and describe what he's wearing, please?
Yes, he's got a very bright blue tie on over there.
Okay. Wearing a suit?
Wearing a suit,
What
yep.
color is the suit?
Black, or navy.
All right. Your Honor, let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
Okay, well,
And how do you know the defendant?
Him and I used to play a card game together called Magic the Gathering, usually on Friday nights at a comic book store called Blank's Comics.
Okay. And was that comic book store, or is that comic book store located in the Center Points Mall?
It is no longer located in the Center Point Mall. It is now located at the mall, just kind of like across the expressway at the Lakes Mall.
Gotcha. Well, let me ask you this. Back in April of 2013, was that comic book store located at the Center Points Mall?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as part of playing that, and I guess how long had you been playing this card game with the defendant?
I had been playing Magic the Gathering since I was 12. I've known the defendant to be playing with me Since probably around 2003, 2004. I don't have an exact date.
Okay. So it's been a few years. You guys have played this game.
We played for probably about a decade on and off, yes.
Okay. Now, is it typical on a weekend where there would be, I guess, a card tournament, a magic tournament? I don't know what they call it. But.
Yeah, so generally speaking, many comic books host what is known as Friday Night Magic, which is a tournament. Our particular store was hosting what was called Legacy on that night. I was actually playing poker a few buildings down.
All right. So let's talk about April 26, 2013, that particular night. You indicated that there's also another, at the time anyways, in 2013, there was another game room.
Correct.
And that was called what?
The Big Game Room. They were a poker room.
Okay. And so on the 26th, then you are playing poker?
Correct.
Okay. Now, did you know, or did you happen to see the defendant at all that night in the Centerpoint Mall area?
Yes, he was playing Magic. I usually stop in when I play poker and check down there. I have lots of friends who play Magic.
Okay.
And I was associated with Jeffrey at that time, yes.
Okay. Now, then I'm assuming during the poker playing, are there breaks that happen?
In tournaments, there were breaks, but I was playing cash that night. And so, generally speaking, if I would just win a big hand or something, or just needed to go for a little walk, get myself away from the table for a few minutes, I would go down and just kind of check in.
All right. On April 26th of 2013, do you recall how many times you walked from the big game room to the comic book store?
I would say it would either be 2 or 3. I'm not sure on which one. But generally speaking, I would check in a little bit right after they started the tournament, and I would check in towards the end of the night around 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Okay. Now, again, on that particular day, did you in fact walk down on a break and stop in at the comic book store?
Yes.
Okay. Now, and again, if you recall, do you recall the first time about what time the first time was that you walked down?
As usual, it would probably be between 7:15.
Okay. And when you walked down to the comic book store on that particular night, did you see the defendant?
Yes.
And was he playing in whatever the tournament?
Yes, he was playing Magic that night.
Okay. Now, again, I'm assuming then later on you went back to playing poker?
Afterwards, I probably went back to play poker. I'm not sure, but I oftentimes often got Chinese, and usually I would stop in around where I would get my Chinese and say hi one more time. And
okay.
So I might have gotten Chinese that night, but I don't know.
Okay. Now, do you recall on that particular night the last time that you stopped in the comic book store?
Yes, it was probably around 9:30.
All right. And did you see the defendant at that point in time?
Yes, they were, I think, about ready to break for top 8, which is the best 8 scorers all play against each other.
And do you know whether or not he was still playing?
Yes.
He was?
Yes.
Was he part of this top 8?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And after that, did you stop back over to say hi at some point in time in the evening?
I don't think so. As I said, it was pretty late already. It was about 9:30 when I saw him in the top 8.
And typically, when do these tournaments usually end?
Anywhere between 9:45 and 11. Tom really liked to try and get us out of there as close to 10 as possible, but rarely that was the case.
Okay. Now, I know that, and I don't know on that particular night, on April 26, 2013, whether or not you knew or had any idea what time the Magic tournament ended.
I'm not sure what time the tournament ended, no.
All right. And do you remember what time you left the big game room?
I left the big game room probably around 1:30, 2 a.m. I was very well aware of the activity going on at the gas station.
Oh, okay. So that was already happening as you walked out of the big game room.
Yeah, and obviously because there were big windows and you could see the gas station from like it was just to the left, and you could see there was a ton of cop cars there. And if I believe the the poker tournament, they're all charity poker. And I believe that night it might have even been Fraternal Order of Police, so we had a ton of police actually in the building.
Okay, okay. Now, the big game room, though, sits in the far corner of the Center Points Mall.
Right, it's kitty corner from where the gas station is,
Yeah,
correct?
I mean, quite a distance from the gas station.
About 500 yards. Yeah.
Now, obviously, well, you recall testifying at the preliminary examination for this matter. This was several months ago.
Yes.
And talking about time frames and whatnot. Do you recall in the examination talking about being over at Lang's the last time you were at Lang's, anywhere at a 9:45, 9:50 time frame? You remember testifying to that?
Yes, between 9:30 and 9:50 probably is most likely when I was over there.
Okay. And that's when you saw the defendant?
Correct.
Okay. And if I understood correctly, and this is similar to other tournaments, you start as a big group, then you kind of whittle your way down?
Yeah, just like most other tournament structures, correct.
Okay. And it was your understanding that the defendant, who must be a pretty good Magic player, and you would know, is he a good Magic player?
He was pretty good. He was really invested in Magic at that point. He recently showed off a new card that he got with $300, so he was pretty invested.
So it's your, I guess, and I know I kind of asked you this, but in the time frames that you have played in the Magic tournament, so when you weren't playing poker, but you're actually playing Magic, the card game, they would typically go past when the owner wanted you to stick around?
When it wasn't the owner, but the person who ran the shop. And generally speaking, they would go usually till about 10, 15, all the way to 11 o'clock, depending on how many people showed up.
Gotcha. And again, you recall back on April 26, 2013, were there quite a few people playing in this tournament that you can remember?
I want to say that there was maybe a dozen to 16 players that night. I have no recollection on the exact number. I kind of have a good idea of who was there because there was a lot of stuff going on.
Well, and again, I mean, as you indicated, I think you're friends with a lot of those folks that they must be regular players. They show up on a routine basis.
Correct.
Okay. Give me 1 second. During that time frame, did you know the vehicle that the defendant drove?
I believe he had recently purchased a new vehicle.
And did you know what that was?
It was a van of some sort. I don't know the exact make and model.
And that's a fair answer to a kind of a broad question. And do you remember, was he driving that vehicle that night?
Yes.
Okay. I have nothing else, Judge.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
How did you know my client was driving the van that night?
I saw it when I was walking there. I also believe I've walked out with him to his car before, so I knew what it looked like.
All right. Is Magic a timed game, or is it? I mean, in other words, can you just keep playing it all night if that's what you're?
I mean, the matches themselves are timed, but overall, the tournament can, like I said, they tend to go a bit later than what the owner would like. Generally speaking, the matches are like the matches there were 40 minutes apiece.
Okay.
I think it's been a while since I played Magic at Lang's.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
I have nothing else, Judge.
All right, thank you, sir. You may stand down.
You're all set.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Just give me 1 second here, Judge, to set up, and I'll call my next witness. All right. People of the state of Michigan call Eric Barber to the stand.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please have a seat. State your name.
Eric
Spell your name,
Barber.
please.
ERICBARBER.
Good afternoon, Mr. Barber.
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm all right.
All right. I want to direct your attention to April 26, 2013, around the 11 o'clock hour, okay?
Okay.
Do you recall that night?
Yes, I do.
And on that particular day, did you know a person by the name of Susan Follett?
Yes, I do.
And what was your relationship with Miss Follett on that day?
We were married.
Now, where was Miss Follett employed?
Sternberg Exxon.
Okay. Now, on that particular night, was she working that night?
No.
And what, if any, decision did you two make that you were going to do that night?
I decided to go for a motorcycle ride because it was a nice night.
All right. And did you have your own motorcycle?
Yes, I did.
And did Miss Follett decide to join you on that ride?
Yes, she did.
And does she have her own motorcycle?
Yes, she does.
And where did you leave from?
My house.
And what route did you take?
Down Laketon to Henry Street.
Okay.
And then over the float bridge, over to Sternberg Road.
Okay. And when you got to Sternberg Road, what direction did you go?
We took a left on Sternberg.
Okay. Now, as you were driving down Sternberg, did you get to the intersection of Sternberg and Old Grand Haven?
Yes, we did.
Now, is that in close proximity to the Exxon gas station?
Yes, it is.
All right. As you cross the intersection, and just so you're aware, I mean, I know it's in front of you there, but the map is also behind you on the big screen. And there should be a little stick there, too, in front of you. See it?
Okay.
As you cross the intersection of Old Grand Haven and Sternberg, do you notice anything?
Yes, I did.
What was that?
Silver minivan.
All right, and where do you first see that silver minivan?
When going by the Exxon station.
Okay, so you do not pick that minivan up anywhere along the route. The first time you see it is as you're driving past the Exxon.
Driving past it, yes.
All right. Can you show the jury? And let me ask you this: do you see the minivan come into the station, or where do you see it?
I see it making the corner right around the gas station there.
Okay. Can you point on the map behind you where that is, please?
This is the station here?
Yes, sir.
Yep, that corner right there.
Okay. So as you are riding your motorcycle, and are you kind of parallel with that van? Are you ahead of it, behind it, or?
A parallel, I'd say.
Okay. So as you're kind of making your way, you see that van on the corner, and is it parked or is it moving?
It's moving.
And in what direction is it going?
East. Around the building.
Okay, around the building. And does it do anything, and maybe you could show the stick, please, the direction it's going.
Oh, it went around this way here.
Okay?
And then it shut its lights off.
Okay, and at what point did it shut its lights off?
Right about there.
Right about there? And did it stop and park at that point in time, or did did it continue?
It continued going.
Okay. And did you see, I guess, what was the last image of that van you had as you passed it on Sternberg Road there? What was it doing?
It was turning off its lights
Okay. And where was it going?
around the back of the store.
All right. Did you see it go around the back of the store?
I seen it make the corner to go back there.
Okay. So essentially, you saw this van make two corners, the front corner and then the back corner.
Correct.
And if I understand your testimony, sir, by the time it made the back corner, the lights were already out.
Yes.
And when you say lights, what lights are we talking about?
The lights behind the store, or the van lights.
The headlights?
Yes.
Okay. So you get to the stoplight there at Sternberg and Harvey, right?
Yes.
What happens next?
My wife says something doesn't look right. Let's go back and look.
Okay. And where did you turn around?
The tire place there.
Bell Tire?
Yeah, right in front of Myers.
All right. So you make the U-turn or you turn around, and do you come back on, would be west on Sternberg at this point? Going towards the lake?
Yes, going towards the lake.
All right. And could you describe for the jury then where you and your wife pull in?
We pull into the small parking lot there.
Okay. And again, using the map behind you and the stick, what drive do you pull in and?
We pull in this drive here,
Okay.
go around there, we park up in there.
Up in the parking lot of the Center Points Mall?
Yes.
And sir, do you have an idea of about what time it was? And I should have asked you this earlier, so I apologize. What time it was when you first drove by the gas station?
It was just before 11.
All right. And what makes you so sure about that?
I checked my cell phone.
Oh, okay. Now, when you go along that, I'll call it the far eastern service drive there, and you get to a point where you can see behind the Exxon, do you see anything back there?
A van.
Okay. And just so I'm referencing this right for you, this is as you and Ms. Follett are driving, would be north on that service drive, right?
Correct.
And do you see anything unusual at that point as you're driving by?
I see a van parked there.
Okay. Outside of that, any movement or anything of that nature?
No.
Okay. And point out again where you and Ms. Follett parked your bikes?
It was up in here.
Up in there?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, from where you were parked, could you see behind the gas station?
A little bit.
Okay. And from your vantage point, or from your view, what, if anything, did you see?
I seen a light go off and on.
Okay. Could you tell where that light was coming from?
It looked like the back hatch.
Of the van?
Yes.
Now, was there any correlation to the back hatch being up or down when you saw the light?
I couldn't tell you.
You couldn't tell me? All right. So at one point in time, you see the light, and I'm assuming you're talking about the dome light?
Yes.
And is there any movement that causes that light to go on or off?
The door opening up.
Which door?
The rear hatch.
All right. Is the hatch being lifted up or pushed down?
It was being lifted up and then down for just a few seconds, and then it opened back up. The light came back on again.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, you see the hatch come down and then kind of pop up
Yeah.
and then push back down.
Right.
All right. Now, after you see that, what happens next?
The van goes down the road. I don't know what road that is.
All right,
but it
well,
went past us.
Show us on the map.
The van left, went this way. And
Okay.
out the parking lot.
Okay, and so that, I'm going to call that the east-west service road.
Okay.
So that, the van leaves behind the Exxon station
Right.
and travels, I guess, west on that service road that you just pointed out. Is that that correct?
Yes, it is.
Now, prior to the van moving, did you see, or could you see, any person?
No, I couldn't.
Did you see anybody get in the driver's side of the vehicle?
No, I didn't.
All right. So from your vantage point, you had a difficult time kind of seeing that part of it?
Yes.
Okay. As the van is making its way along that east-west service drive, what do you and Miss Follett do?
We follow it out.
All right. And could you describe for the jury, at what point in time do you come in contact with the vehicle?
When we follow it out the driveway.
Okay. Well, in other words, do you get behind it?
Yes, yes, we got behind it.
Okay. I mean, is there a point where you actually are, for lack of a better way to describe it, T-boning it?
Yes.
Okay. And from the position that you're in, sir, can you see anything?
No.
Can you see whether or not there's any movement in the van at all?
No, I could not.
No, you couldn't see it, or you didn't see any movement? I guess it's kind of a back question.
I didn't see any movement.
Okay, you didn't see any movement.
No.
You get it behind the vehicle, right?
Right.
Okay, and then what happens?
We follow it out to the end of the service drive.
All right, in what direction then does the van go?
North.
North on Old Grand Haven?
Yes.
And then you guys go in what direction?
South.
At any point in time, from, again, your vantage point, did you get an opportunity to look at the driver of the vehicle?
No, I did not.
So you don't know whether it was a male or female driving that car?
No.
When you left and went south on Grand Haven Road, where did you go?
Home.
And how long does it take you to get home?
About 15 minutes, maybe.
Okay. And when you got home, were you able to go to bed right away?
No.
What happened?
We got a phone call.
How soon after you arrived home did you get your phone call?
Right away. Like maybe a minute
Okay.
or two.
And who was calling you? I guess who was calling the house?
Her boss. Susan's
From-
boss.
From the Exxon station?
Yes.
And again, after that conversation, did you guys get a chance to go to bed, or where'd you go?
We went back to the Exxon station.
Okay. And is that where you met up with some police officers?
Yes.
I want to show you a series, just a couple of photographs here. And again, you can look at your monitor. This is People's Exhibit 75. Does that look consistent with the van you saw that night?
Yes, it does.
People 76, passenger side view, again, does that look consistent with what you saw that night?
Yes, it does.
And finally, people 77, since you were behind, does that look consistent with what you saw that night?
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Barber.
Good afternoon.
I don't know if we met. I'm Fred Johnson. Did we meet the last time you testified?
I don't think so.
Okay, maybe that's someone else. All right. We're talking about this afternoon, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you're kind of a soft-spoken guy. I'm going to do the same thing I did with another gentleman. I'm going to stand over here and ask you questions from here, because that way I know if I can hear you, this gentleman way over here can hear you.
Okay.
Okay? All right, good. First of all, you talked about what you were doing the night in question. Why were you and your wife out on your motorcycles that night?
It was a nice night, so I decided to go for a ride.
Did you do any stopping while you were out?
Yes, we did.
Where did you stop?
I believe it was a Wendy's parking lot or one of those parking lots over there. We stopped to have a cigarette.
Okay. That was the only stop that you can recall? recall?
Yes.
All right. So you get on your bike and you start riding around again. And, so could you put the map back up there for me, please? Or the aerial view, I should say. Thank you. You start riding around again and you roll past, she's your former wife now, correct?
Correct.
At that time you were married?
Yes.
You rolled past your wife's, at that time, place of work. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is there any reason why you went past her place of work?
Well, when we were at the Winnie's or whatever, I said I thought it'd be nice to go over the float bridge. I thought it looked pretty cool at night, so we ended up going over that way. And then we were going to take Sternberg on the way back to the house.
So it just happened to be on the route.
Just happened to be on the route.
And as you were going by the route, you noticed a silver van. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now, you said it was about 11 o'clock
Mm-hmm.
at that time. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you noticed a silver van, and as you testified, the silver van is already on the store parking lot, the gas station parking lot.
Yes, it was.
And you're on the road at that time?
Yes.
Okay. So you can see that van from the road?
Yes.
The parking lot lit up well enough so you can see the van?
Yeah.
All right. And as the van goes past the front, first of all, can you point to where the front of the store is? Let's make sure we're all on the same page here.
Right here.
Okay. And as the van goes past the store and around the side, is when it goes around the side, it turns off its lights. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The lights were on until then?
Yes.
All right. So it goes past the side, but you are on the motorcycle going down the other way.
Right.
So at that point, you're not looking at it, and your wife says, let's go back.
Right.
Okay? Did your wife explain to you why she wanted to go back?
She said something doesn't look right, let's go back.
Okay. So that's what you do.
Yep.
All right. You go back, and you obviously you go on the service road there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
When you go back, can you see, when you first get back, can you see this thing?
Not until I turned around and got parked.
Okay. So you go on the service road, up the service road, into that parking lot, and then park.
Right.
And from there, you can see the gas station.
Yes.
Why are you interested in the back of the gas station?
Because that's where the van parked.
Okay, but you can't see the van until you get back there.
Right.
So can you explain why are you interested in the back of the gas station? Did you have a reason why?
No, just the van went back there, so we were going back there to see what it was doing.
Okay. Whose idea was it to go back there to see what's going on in the back of the gas station?
Susan said, let's just turn around, so we turned around, that's where we ended up.
Okay.
Was back
Were you
over
following her lead at that point, or were you the head person, I should say?
I think she was in lead.
Okay. So she kind of, as you were, I guess you were mostly side by side, but you were basically pacing her?
Yes.
You went where she went?
Yeah.
And she stopped in that parking lot to look back at the back of a store?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. You're looking back at the back of the store. Is the light on in the back of the store?
No.
Okay. So the back of the store is dark until you see a light open?
Until I see the hatch open in the
hatch
back.
open.
Yeah.
All right. Now, is your recollection that was the hatch and not the back of the store door opening?
I'm pretty sure it was the hatch.
Okay. You're pretty sure?
Well, I'm sure it was the hatch.
Okay. And why is that, sir?
Just because the way it opened.
Okay, so you could see the hatch?
No, I
This
could see the
on it.
light on it in the hatch.
Okay, so the hatch has a light on it?
Yes.
And as it opened up, the hatch has a light on it?
Yeah.
Okay. So is it how long are you where, strike that. How long does it take you to get into position? In other words, it's about 11 o'clock when you go by. About what time is it by the time you're in a position in that parking lot looking back at the store?
I'd say probably 11 o'clock.
It's about 11 o'clock then?
Yeah.
So it didn't take you, well, let me make sure I don't confuse you because I have a habit of doing that. I think you testified when you went past the store the first time, it was about 11 o'clock.
It was just before. Yeah, I'm being confused.
Okay, now, first of all, this was 4 years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So no one's expecting you to know exactly, we're just asking you the best you recollect, approximately what time was it when you went back to the store?
I'd say about 11 o'clock.
Okay, so when you get in position, how much time has passed? How long does it take you to get
Probably a
back?
few minutes.
A few minutes? 2 minutes? 5 minutes? 10 minutes?
I'd say 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay, So maybe it's about 11:03 or 11:04, something like that?
Could be,
Okay, all right. So you're in position, you're looking back, and you see the hatch come up and down. Right?
Uh-huh.
And then once the hatch closes, there's no light again.
Right,
And then the van takes off, right?
right.
Okay, and does it come past you where you're sitting?
Yes, it does.
Now, when you and your wife are sitting there, are your motorcycle lights on?
I don't remember if they were or not.
Okay. Were you worried that the person in the van would see you sitting there watching him or her?
Not really.
Okay. So you don't know if your lights were still on or not? As you sat there?
I don't think they were. I think they were off.
Okay. But as you start moving again, when you turn your bike on, you
The
start...
lights come on.
The lights come on?
Yes.
Okay. Was there anything between you and the van that would have prevented someone in the van from seeing your lights come on?
Susan was in front of me.
Okay. Was there... My question was there a wall or anything between you and the van?
Oh, no.
Okay, all right. And as you followed the van, was there anything to prevent the person in the van from seeing that the two of you are following?
No.
Okay. Were you able to pick up the license plate on this vehicle?
No.
All right. So, the vehicle left, and that was the last you'd seen of it, correct?
Correct.
All right. And so at that point, did you go back to the store to see if everything was okay?
No.
Okay. Did you have a cell phone with you?
Yes.
Did you know if your wife had one?
Yes, she did.
Do you know she called the store to see if everything was okay at the store?
Did she call the store?
Yes, sir.
No.
Okay, you just went home after that?
Yes.
Okay. Did your wife express to you at the, don't tell me what she said, but did she express to you at the time what she thought was strange about what's going on? Did she say, this is why I think it's strange, or this is why I think it's going on, or anything along those lines?
No.
Now, you got the call, and the both of you came back that night?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Do you remember talking to the police about what you'd seen?
Yes.
Do you remember telling the police officer that what you saw that night looked like a town and country automobile van?
Yes.
And is that because you have a friend or relative who has one, so they were familiar to you?
Correct.
Okay. So when you saw those pictures that Mr. Hilson put up you of a van, that's a van that looks similar to the one you saw. You're not saying that's the one, that's the one.
No, I'm saying it's similar.
Okay. Mr. Barber, thank you very much. I don't have any further questions.
I don't have any either, Judge. Thank you.
Okay.
You're all set.
Okay.
Okay, the attorneys tell me this would be a good time for us to break. It's 5 o'clock, or a couple minutes to 5, so we'll take our evening recess at this time, ladies and gentlemen. Just want to remind you not to discuss the case with anyone or view any media accounts of this. And I hope you have a pleasant evening. You know, Tom, do we have any?
So far, we don't.
Okay. We're going to shoot for 9:30 again in the morning, so we'll see you here at 9:30. Court will be in recess.